Selina Busby from Central School of Speech and Drama at the University of London. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you. I don't usually do PowerPoints, so this is a bit weird.
It's going okay. There it is.
There it is. Don't expect much. It's a few pictures, really. That's all it is. But I thought it would be good so that you don't just have to listen to me talk. Oh no, I don't want to add a new slide. What am I doing? Slideshow. From the beginning. Okay. Now I've got to remember to press the button to change it as well. In this paper, I intend to consider where a specific applied theatre project which trains facilitators from the renownedly posh, although I dispute that, renownedly posh Central School of Speech and Drama, trains facilitators from Central School of Speech and Drama to work with people from Dharavi, which is a slum in India. So I'm going to be considering how this project functions on a continuum of radical intervention and radical containment, and asking if the work has utopic potential or if it's merely reinforcing concepts of cultural invasion and colonialism. I've been troubled by international applied theatre projects since first working outside the UK 10 years ago, and I struggle with the utopia and cultural invasion continuum. I'm no less troubled by any of this as a result of James Thompson's call for the end to a theatre that privileges effect over affect, and his own continuum of the deeply regressive and the truly radical. Over the last 20 years, I've been a school teacher, a drama educator, a teacher trainer, and now an applied theatre practitioner and academic. During this time, the thinking and the policies that directly affect this work and its funding streams have varied greatly, and the process product or effect-affect debates have influenced and changed the ever-expanding field. The ways I have described, named and defined the work has also mutated a great deal over the last 20 years. Perhaps the most pertinent to my own experiences of using drama in a variety of contexts over the last 2 decades are the debates that focus on the nature of theatre as a site for radical intervention or as a means of reinforcing power struggles at play within the system. There are, however, 2 things for me that have not changed. The first, throughout all of this work, I am troubled by the intention to change participants. That's a recurrent focus of the work. And secondly, I'm conversely increasingly aware that despite this unease, what has not changed for me is an ethos of hope that underpins my practice. Recently, I've started to think about this work as a pedagogy of utopia. So in this paper, I shall focus on a project that I have tutored over the last 8 years with students from the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama, working in partnership with an Indian practitioner, theatre maker, an NGO based in Mumbai, and young people who live in Dharavi. Let's have a change of slide. Borrowing Rick Knowles' notion described in his text, Reading Material Theatre, I want to look at the degrees to which the transgressive or transformative potential of this work functions on a continuum from radical intervention to radical containment. I'm using Knowles' description of radical containment as being the control of elements in society in the interests of the reproduction of the dominant order. I'm looking at a continuum from what I will call a pedagogy of utopia, therefore to a pedagogy of radical containment. In this, I'm drawing on Paul Ricoeur's, male theorists, cursing myself. In this, I'm drawing on Paul Ricoeur's thinking and definition of utopia as an extension of Henry Giroux and Bell Hooks' definition of a pedagogy of hope. Bell Hooks talks about a pedagogy of hope as being a discourse of critique and social transformation, while Giroux tells us that hope gives substance to the recognition of the present that is incomplete, and that hope is a mobilising foundation for human beings to learn about their potential as more civil beings. Here, I want to go further and explore the utopia using Paul Ricoeur's definition of it. He doesn't use the word to mean a dream or hope of a better place, but the capacity to change, the capacity and desire to change reality. Before I get to the project itself, I just need to say that using the word utopia makes me feel very uncomfortable. It's a word that's fallen into disrepute and one that's often dismissed as an outdated and impossibly naive concept in a society where the growth of neoliberalism has ensured that change is no longer possible. It's a word that's associated both with idle dreams and totalitarian ambitions. Michael Hither-Jacobson observes that although currently unpopular, visions of utopia are stubbornly persistent. In her book Utopia and Performance, Finding Hope at the Theatre, Jill Dolan is more optimistic about this contrary concept and links utopia and live theatre, drawing on the idea of the active spectator in order to make the claim that, I quote, live performance provides a place where people can come together, embodied and passionate, to share experiences of meaning-making and imagination that can describe or capture fleeting imitations of a better world. Audiences feel themselves allied with each other with a broader, more capricious sense of public, in which a social discourse articulates the possible rather than the insurmountable obstacles to human potential. Whilst this seems extremely optimistic, it's this sense of the social discourse articulating the possible that underpins my thinking and practice. Is it the potential of participatory drama to stimulate the questioning of experiences? It is the potential of participatory drama to stimulate the questioning of experiences that I suggest enables a pedagogy of utopia to emerge. In this, I'm appropriating Ricoeur's notion that a utopia wants to be realised, and therefore the intention of utopia is to change. That isn't to say that the intention of applied theatre is to make change happen, but that for me, the intention might be for the participants to see that there is a potential for them to create change. Ricoeur also writes about the social imagination, which is both constructive and destructive, offering both confirmation and contestation of the present. The social imagination sees what is and can critique it, and from this point can therefore configure a utopia or a productive imagining of something else. From this elsewhere, it's possible to look back to where we've come from, re-examine the present, which now looks strange, and open up the field of the possible. In his Principle of Hope, Ernst Bloch describes people as being unfinished or in a state of animated by dreams or desires for a better life, or utopian longings for another way of being. Bloch defines two utopias, the abstract or the dream, and the concrete, or the utopia that constitutes a real possibility. The distinction for the two for Bloch resides in the power of anticipation. Through the power of anticipation, it's possible to see an ideologically unobstructed view, and this unobstructed view leads to a clear understanding of what is now, and maybe what could be in the future. This also equates to Ricoeur's field of the possible, or a place where it's possible to re-examine what is in order to see what might be. In other words, the concept of utopia contains anticipation for what both Bloch and Ricoeur describe as the not yet. I would argue that the role of theatre is to open up this field of the possible and to glimpse the not yet, and that through it, both audiences and participants can see beyond the real to a field for the creation of an alternative way of living, or indeed that it's the role of those who facilitate theatre making to create the moments where this change is possible. So my question here is, does the Daravi Theatre Project offer the participants a new form of colonialisation or a way to shatter the present order? Oh, look, there are the students playing. Sorry. That's what I wanted to get to. The project. The Daravi Project started as a student project on a unit of a BA at Central School of Speech and Drama. It involved 5 students working with a group of young people to create a piece of theatre over 4 weeks in June. My own role in the project is to support the students and participants in the process and actually formally assess the students while they're doing that. While in India, the students are supported by an Indian colleague, Divya Bharti, a translator, and Satish Dembi, the translator. The word translator here underestimates our translator. Satish is a creative, dynamic theatre practitioner in his own right. He's worked with us from the start, first as Divya's assistant in that very first year, now 8 or 9 years ago, more of an apprentice than an assistant, that Divya noticed as a wayward young street dweller on his own first project in Daravi. Satish was a participant with a dubious background and some brushes with the law. Not that I tell the students that, but at first as a trainee facilitator himself. Daravi is a unique and complex place. It was once a swamp and then a fishing village for migrant workers. It's now somewhat infamously known as the largest slum in India. It's an area that's been given worldly visibility by Danny Boyle's film Slumdog Millionaire. It has an image of a violent, dirty, pest-ridden location without services and sanitation. Sometimes vilified as an eyesore and a pit of squalor, sometimes romanticised, as in the documentary by Kevin MacLeod, romanticised as a place where community and real feeling are alive and strong. In reality, let's go back one. In reality, it's a collection of slums or a continuous settlement, each with its own identity. It's been in its current location since 1909, originally on the outskirts of Bombay, where its inhabitants were encouraged to live both out of sight and out of mind of the main city. Over the last 100 years or so, as Bombay has spread and expanded around Dharavi, it now sits in the centre of Mumbai and occupies a prime location, as you can see, right up against the tennis courts and five-star hotels. As a young settlement, it was born in limbo without consistent government investment or planning or support. In the 1960s, it grew from a district village-like settlement pushed from the legal city into a densely packed area located between the two main Mumbai suburban railways. There are several ways in and out of the area, and water lines and sewer lines have been added around the houses and the buildings to support Mumbai. Two main roads cut right through the centre of it. Its size is daunting. With an estimated 1.5 million people packed into a square mile, it's a settlement with more people living in it than Birmingham, but in a fraction of the space. It has 27 temples, 11 mosques, 6 churches, retail shops, warehouse, goods companies, transport companies, lawyers, accountants, hotels, entertainment businesses, health clinics, and an estimated GDP of over $1.5 billion. But it's not considered a city in its own right. Traditional entrenched attitudes and colonial-era ideas about cities consign Dharavi to the slum status. It's an area that contains the very poor and destitute alongside hundreds of thousands of jobs and incomes rising from global economies that, due to its industries, has a global legitimisation, ironically far in advance of any local legislation for its inhabitants' property, ownership or government services. People who live there have a precarious existence with no legal status and no postal addresses. Families that number 15 individuals live in often less than 300 square foot homes that were illegally built on land that was not owned by the builders and are now rented illegally, hence their occupants' legal non-status, leaving many of them deprived of basic rights and services. Originally, low-rise structures grew up arranged in no order, with roads and lanes added later. But there is an order to the disorder here, and there are several localities that are distinct from each other in terms of communities and their history, just like the suburbs of any other city. Most dwellings are in need of sanitation and adequate clean water, but it's a settlement as cosmopolitan as the rest of Mumbai. It's one where space is at a premium, so that areas are multi-purpose: a street, lunchroom, playground, political meeting place, pathway, production line, and drama workshop all occupy the same patch of ground, often at the same time. Homes double as factories, offices and recycling centres and shops. It's a city or sub-city that runs 24 hours a day, with people, including the very young, often working very long days of 18 hours or more for very little return. It's not just a chaotic collection of people and structures, it's also a vibrant collection of individuals, families and communities who've figured out a way to survive in the most adverse of conditions. A very good photograph, but I think you can see it's the river on the edge. Lack of private toilets and sanitation mean... Oh, sorry, I'm going to backtrack slightly. It's a vibrant collection of individuals, families, communities who figured out a way to survive in the most adverse of conditions. But this should not be romanticised. There is nothing to celebrate about living in cramped houses with no natural light, ventilation, water or sanitation. No one should live like this. A lack of private toilets and sanitation mean that the people use the overcrowded facilities or urinate and defecate directly into the river. The current estimate is that there's 1,400 people for every toilet in Dharavi. So people urinate and defecate directly into the river. And when monsoon rains flood the city each year, this river water floods directly into the pavements and floors of Dharavi. It's a sub-city where a lack of clean water and space leads to the death of 13,000 children every year from preventable diseases. The NGO that we work in partnership with is a Dharavi-based non-profit organisation called SNEHA. Sneha believes that investing in women's health is essential to building viable urban communities, and it's been operating in Dharavi for 20 years, well, probably 25 years by now. Sneha is an acronym that stands for Society for Nutrition, Education and Health Action, but it's also a Sanskrit word for love. Sneha's mission is to work at a community level to empower women and slum communities to be the catalyst of change in their own right. For the young participants in our project, the change that Sneha wants is that the young people learn to see a different future for themselves, which in Sneha's terms means involving job prospects, and this directly means that they learn English. Sneha work with the very least advantaged inhabitants of the area. Many of the young people are homeless even by Dharavi standards, and many have no responsible adults in their lives, having come to Mumbai to follow Bollywood dreams. They see little prospect of change in their lives, and they talk about a lack of alternatives, but at the same time they dream of escape through being discovered as a Bollywood star. Here, in Dharavi, the participants, I think, could be said to be living in the first stage of utopia, a fantasy of a luxurious Bollywood career and lifestyle. It's an abstract dream of a better life, or as Ernst Bloch might say, an idle bed of contemplation. These young people know that they want a different life. They're longing to live on Bollywood Drive rather than in Dharavi Street. And in this project, we're guilty of exploiting this fantasy and at the same time establishing some extremely colonial attitudes to the English language as a means of improvement. We were invited by Sneha to work on a project to improve English language skills. Sneha didn't mind what methods we used. We chose theatre, and to draw on those Bollywood dreams, and performance was an obvious hook to get the young people involved. A hook that allowed our students and the youngsters from Dharavi to be creative, to make theatre and play in a space where playtime is both hard to find spatially and temporally. It also created a space for our students to train as facilitators and the Dharavi young people to take part in an exchange that's hard to find. The Indian practitioner and I wanted to work within a dialogical performance practice that enabled two groups of young people to meet, where in the normal run of things there would be no chance of them meeting. We were interested in the development of what Ramon Panikar might describe as a pluriverse, a place in which intercultural dialogue is a mutual opening up to the concern of the other, a sharing of common values that both party acknowledges but neither party controls. But we were aiming for that within Sneha's objective that the participants learn English, which brings our first stage utopic dream of a pluriverse back down to earth as a deeply regressive practice that could be described as radical containment that reinforces colonialism. In the rehearsal room, or sometimes street, sometimes temple, sometimes shopfront, as we worked that first year as a group of 40, I and the students struggled with the complex ethical dilemmas of the project, but we focused on the work, on the theatre, on the facilitation. The students shared their performance skills as facilitators, devisers and directors. The participants shared their own performance skills, traditions, and theatre was made. Not entirely beautiful theatre, but performance with beautiful moments along the way. Maybe it even had one of Jill Dolan's exquisite moments. Nobody talked about learning English. Nobody worked towards that as a goal, as a strategic aim. But by the end of the project, some of the students and I had some Hindi and Marathi, and the participants had some English. We were asked back, not once, but 8 times. The June before last, while sitting watching a rehearsal, amongst the qualms of English and one-off short-term projects that have no effect, not to mention the very dangers of wanting an effect at all, while sat in a monsoon-soaked yet dust-ridden space, I had an epiphany, or at least the inklings of one. In the chow and water power break, we pay our participants too, but with food. In the chow and water power break, a participant bought me a small square of chocolate and said in very clear English, "Selina, I've bought you this to say thank you, and I want to know if you're coming back to make more theatre next year." It dawned on me that year, I don't know why it hadn't done before, but it dawned on me that year that each year a hardcore of participants returned and worked on a new play and brought new friends who made theatre with us. We made issue-based but funny, moving, entertaining performances. In that moment, I reflected on the remarkable nature of that commitment to a 4-week-long project once a year, and the fact that our numbers had grown from 40 to 60 participants. How and why did these young people, and now to be fair not so young people, 8 years later, make the commitment to come back when their lives are so often unbelievably fluid and difficult? Why make theatre without emerging facilitators each year at all? I can make guesses about this, and I can make guesses about the effect and the affect of the work, and I'm no more certain about the ethical stance of the work than when we first started. But what I do know is that there's something about this long-term relationship of short-term interventions that's clearly beneficial to the people we work with. It may not be evidence of life change or impact, but I do know that SNEHA have stopped asking us for English lessons and now ask us to return to make theatre as a group, and that they've been fundraising to make theatre when we're not there. I do know that the young people have stopped talking about Bollywood as their dreams, as their only dream, but they're looking to make the same changes in their lives that our translator has made in his. They're looking for work to find ways to facilitate their own work and make theatre all year. I do know that this year, working in India, or June, when we were last there working in India, the project consisted of a co-facilitation team made up of 6 students from Central School of Speech and Drama, 6 Dharavi students, a translator, an Indian practitioner and myself, and that it was an exquisite moment. In fact, it was a series of exquisite moments. I think these participants have moved in, and us have moved in, to Recur's second stage of utopia, where there's a desire for an alternative power, one where a better power replaces the one that exists. And during this process, the young people from Dharavi are training to be facilitators alongside the Central School of Speech and Drama students, not merely just exchanging their skills. So where's the third stage, the concrete utopia, the one that constitutes a real possibility of change, the concrete utopia that opens up the ideologically unobstructed view of human hope? Where is the utopia that opens up the possible? In this extended project, SNEHA itself has demonstrated a change. The work has helped the organisation to position themselves at a distance from their original aims, and they're now in a position of nowhere where they can be the observers who cease to take for granted the present reality. SNEHA itself is in a position of nowhere, or a reflexive moment. This has allowed them to have a new perspective. The utopic quality of the imagination moves us from accepting the constituted to a position of constituting an alternative. Recur asks, may we not then say the imagination itself, through its utopian function, has a constitutive role in helping us rethink the nature of our social life? And so utopia introduces imaginative variations on the topic of society, family, religion, and about a million other things. In this case, it's opened up a reconsideration of the idea of theatre in English. SNEHA have applied for funding for projects for the young people to facilitate a performance, and the older Dharavi performance this last February produced a rehearsal process and a performance with the younger Dharavi inhabitants, and a theatre festival happened. The first theatre festival happened in Dharavi in last February. Don't say that we're the cause of that work, but certainly us being there has encouraged the young people to take the initiative to ask for the money to do it. In Recur's words, the social imagination has been engaged, and the role of the social, and he tells us that the role of the social imagination, activated by utopian endeavour, is to impassionate society, to move it, to motivate it. As a result of this motivation, it may be possible to deinstitutionalise human relations. For Recur, this deinstitutionalisation of human relationships is the kernel of all utopias. And for me, the training of theatre practitioners and the theatre they create is a utopian endeavour to deinstitutionalise human relationships as well. Or it's a radical performance. And so the third stage of utopia, the concrete utopia of this story, is the play that was produced in February by, for and with the young people from Dharavi without Central School of Speech and Drama. This process involved our translator, Satish, who through working on this project over the last 6 years has moved from being a rickshaw driver with no address to an apprentice facilitator to a translator/facilitator to running his own applied theatre projects in Mumbai and Pune, and to making a living out of theatre for both himself and his family. Oh, there he is. Hello, Satish. This might not be evidence of impact. This might be evidence of impact, But does this project offer participants a form of colonialisation or a way to shatter their present order? Yes, it offers a form of colonialisation, radical containment, and is deeply repressive, in that it privileges the use of the English language as a means to gain employment, imposing a belief that these Dharavi residents should desire a change in their domestic living arrangements that would be more in line with the political aspirations and the capital ideology eager to take over the space that Dharavi currently occupies. It also has at its centre aims of effect, or that individuals will be encouraged to change. It's a flawed story. It's a flawed project that focuses on utility, and one that has no happy ending where I can sit here and say that theatre has changed the world, or a community, or even definitely an individual. Alternatives are still very hard for these for the Dharavi young people.
You've got that minute.
I've got about a minute left, that's it. Alternatives are still very hard for these young people to see, let alone create. These participants might now be able to see that there might be an alternative, and Satish might be evidence of that. Is it truly a radical intervention? Is it a pedagogy of utopia? Maybe it's radical in its aims to allow the suggestion that a utopia might be glimpsed, and that the field of the possible might just be visible. To answer Thompson's question at the end of his affects book, I think it has sustained a disruption of the sensible for 8 years. The sensible would be for the Dharavi people not to give up their lives and routines for 4 weeks every year, and yet they do, but sadly not without the promise of effect built into the work. Effect or affect or both. It's not enough for me. There's a glimpse of a concrete utopia arrived at through effect-led affective work, but it doesn't satisfy me. If this is a concrete utopia for some who now see facilitation of theatre as an alternative, and even as a realisable alternative, I still want more, even if it's wrong of me to want more. I'm now back in an abstract utopia where I dream one day of having the Dharavi young people teach our Royal School of Central Speech and Drama students how to facilitate on the Embassy stage in London. Now that would be truly radical.